have. So, Ben Ferguson, Executive Vice President and Chief Technology Officer of defensive.com, also known as Defensive Networks, right?
You nailed it.
All
That's
right.
me.
Well, Ben, that's a pretty impressive title. And I've known you a while now. You do some pretty impressive things. Why don't you briefly just kind of kick this off? Tell us a little bit about what you actually do and sort of how you got to the role that you currently have.
Yeah. Well, so on March 1st, I just celebrated my 16-year anniversary with the company. So I've been there for quite some time. I've had quite a few roles at the company, with executive vice president and CTO being the most recent. And what does that mean exactly? I'm in charge of the technical direction of our company as a whole, and I have the privilege of overseeing everything from our partnerships, what technology that we're really digging at the time and want to offer pro services around, and I oversee our red teaming, our research, and also revenue. So it's all circular in my role, and so it's fun because no 2 days are the same.
And Ben, I would say that one of the things that sets you apart that I've learned about you as we've known each other is you're a very technical person. You really dive deep into the actual architecture, the sort of magic behind the solutions, but you also are into sales, right? I mean, you're right on the sales calls. You're sort of a sales engineer, sort of supercharged version of that, basically, right? Tell me a little bit about that career path. Like, how did you actually, become both so technical but also capable of leading, complex, solutions conversations?
How far do you want me? How far back do you want me to go? You want
Let's hear the story.
the origin story? So yeah, I was raised in a household with a father that's a doctor, mom that's a nurse. And from about age 4 or 5, it was a "Why aren't you a doctor yet?" conversation constantly. So, I and my parents were fantastic, but it was sort of my dad was it would tell me, he's like, stay out of corporate America. You want to get into medicine, you'll always have a job, you'll have flexibility of wherever you want to live. There'll always be opportunities. And the as it turns out, medical schools really limit the number of people that go in there, thus limiting the number of doctors, so you can have artificial scarcity. And that's a whole wreck in itself. Not here to judge it, but good for them. So in college, I studied biochemistry, and I had a minor in engineering sciences. Turns out there's like only four classes you have to do outside of biochemistry to get a whole nother minor. Not that it matters that much, but I got some exposure into coding and some
Hmm.
other things there. What it ended up teaching me was how to learn a lot of really complicated things that you can't see with your naked eye really quickly.
Hmm.
And so that
And
ended up
maybe
being super helpful. But, if you think about what's a linear trajectory from biochemistry, it's not what I do on a day to day basis, that's for sure. And so, how did I end up in this role? Through a series of failures. So, for one, I moved to Los Angeles to work at a biotech company, and
hmm
I was going to do exactly a year there. They didn't know this, but exactly a year, and then go on to medical school. And uh, it was maybe 2 days or 3 days before I graduated, I get a call from probably their HR or something. And it was like, "Hey, we're so excited for you to start. One little footnote is your start date is now up in the air, as we'll call it. And, you know, right now we're trying to find a place for you at the company, and, blah, 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 blah. You're not starting in 2 weeks as planned, basically." And I ended up calling a friend that was working at this company. She was like, "We just had a 40% downsize.
hmm
Our largest shareholder is filing bankruptcy." I graduated 2008, by the way.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, that kind of
Interesting
checks out,
time to
right?
jump into
Checks
the
out.
workforce, right? Yeah.
Yeah. What a
Yeah.
good way to start the workforce.
Right. I had some similar experiences, but yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Um, and so it, you know, 20 nothing year old Ben was sort of like, oh, I'll just get a summer job as a bartender or something like that. And that didn't work out for me. I ended up applying to probably over 100 jobs and then getting one call back, and it was for a tech company.
Mhm,
Happened to be the only one that was really growing in 2008 great financial
mhm,
crisis. And was it my dream job? Absolutely not. Was it a place where I would get a paycheck that I would, be able to feed myself a relatively small amount? Yes. So I was happy to just take that. Um, what it ended up being was it was in tech sales, and they really grind you at this company, which is great for character building. I recommend anyone that's new to the workforce try and find a place that grinds you because you can get in a lot of reps for whatever you're trying to do.
mhm.
Um,
Let's actually pause there for a
okay.
second and pick on that point because, I think obviously we're now in the post-pandemic era. We're in kind of the work from home, hybrid work kind of era. And there is a lot more focus, I think, for Gen Z in particular, but really for everybody on work-life balance. So talk to me a little bit about how your experience sort of in a grinding sort of role, you talked about the reps, the ability to kind of learn skills, right? I think is what you're getting at. How does that fit into a lot of people who say, "Yeah, but I really need work-life balance." Like, where do you sort of draw those lines, or is your answer just you're young, like now's the time to do it?
You're young, now's the time to do it, is the reality.
Mhm,
I if if I was coming into the workforce right now, knowing what I know, would I be doing a 100% remote job that, it gives free massages on the weekends and, work life balance and you can go travel the world? That sounds awesome on paper, and it probably is awesome, let's be honest. In reality, I think that the financial state of our company is not really allowing for many of those roles anymore.
mhm.
Certainly not an entry level,
Our
but
country, basically,
yeah.
yeah.
But let's just say that they still exist.
Mhm,
I would say massive disservice to your future not being in the mix. I got so much value off of being in the office in that first job, every job
mhm,
really, being
mhm,
in the office around the smartest people and the leaders of a company is more valuable than any little skills, technical skills or
mhm.
whatever you're going to pick up along the way. Is just understanding how businesses function, businesses think, understanding, working for a company, you're a cog in a big machine. And if you're just looking at your cog and saying the worst thing, which is this really in my job description?
Yeah.
Those are not
Mhm.
those are
Kinda
terrible for you.
self-limiting choices,
Self-limiting
basically,
choices,
right? Yeah,
absolutely.
yeah.
If you're a cog in a machine and you don't understand the inner workings of the whole machinery,
Mhm.
you're doing yourself a massive
Right,
disservice. You want to understand where the company is going and how you participate in that and how you're doing your part to drive the business forward. If not, you're putting yourself at disproportionate risk of being dispensable to the company,
yeah.
right?
No, I think those are great points, and especially in an era where, layoffs happen, you know, very quickly, very easily. Any concept, I think, of loyalty and frankly, either direction is largely antiquated, right? To your point, if you're not visible, if you're not trying to grow, you're not learning about the company, its mission, and where you fit into it, not only now, but where you'll fit in next, right?
Yeah.
Then you're kind of setting yourself up to be potentially on one of those spreadsheets.
Yeah. I mean, if you're remote and you're just again a cog in the machine and you're only focusing on your functions of your cog,
Mhm.
right? Then it makes you way too replaceable. Right? But if you're in the culture of the company, you understand where you're going, you're driving towards that, you're visible, then you're no longer an employee ID number
Mhm.
that's going to be emotionlessly cut at some point.
Right.
And so being indispensable, but it's also, I mean, let's actually not just give the side of just you need to be a cheerleader for the company to for your own safety, for your own job security. I think that if you understand the bigger vision and picture of the company, you're helping work towards that. I think that makes you a more happy employee. You know, we
Mm,
spend I spend the majority of my waking hours working for a company. Um, and if I feel part of the team, valued, my inputs are taken into account. And you know, this is not just from a CTO perspective. Obviously, you know, easy to say that, but from being a bottom of the totem pole role, because we all have to start somewhere. Um, Contributing and feeling like you're part of something, and understanding the vision and saying, this is a vision I can get behind. It makes your work day just a lot better,
yeah.
right? Because we as humans, we all need to be on a mission working towards something. I feel like
Mhm.
we evolved for, you know, millions of years as primates to work together as teams. And you know, if you're on an island, not maybe maybe a literal island, but if you're on an island, from a workflow enclave perspective, you're just going to get like every little inconvenience of the job, which
Right.
every job has inconveniences and annoying things, is going to be a point of fixation. It's just this is how we're wired as humans.
Yeah, no, it sounds like you're really almost drawing a pretty stark set of choices. Almost, one side is sort of self-limiting. You're kind of just a cog in the machine, a line on a spreadsheet. The other side is really more kind of activated and actualized, not only in terms of your contributions to the organization, but for yourself as well. I mean, it's actually, I think it's really interesting how you're presenting it. I mean, I think a lot of the work from home, hybrid work kind of debate honestly focuses more on some of the logistics, right? And then sometimes some of the better conversations I've heard about it get into mentorship or topics along those lines. But I haven't really heard a lot of people frame it the way you just did, where it kind of transcends into even just like, are you maybe actually happier? Really being part of the team and being sort of fully activated and all of that. So that's really interesting. Um, all right. So I kind of cut you off there. So you're working at the tech company. You're still a pretty early level employee. So where do you go from there?
This was a sales job and in tech, and what I realized early on was the technical win aspect of being in tech sales is often more important than everything else. And so you get these sales managers that you know, they talk about all these, you know, sales 101 and closing techniques, and I found the whole bit to be very disingenuous genuous, and it's like an acting
Mm,
class. You
mhm.
know, you're teaching reps to like deliver this conviction of, if you don't buy my solution, your whole business is going to fail.
I've heard that once or twice on the other
Yeah,
side of it.
right. And I found the whole thing to be
Yeah,
gross and
yeah.
disingenuous. And I I knew I was never going to be able to ham that up.
Mhm.
And so, but you know, you could ham that up, and that wasn't for me. Then on the sales engineer side, it was sort of like, all right, you'd find an opportunity, and then you'd let the engineers deliberate, and then arrive at a, oh, this is a good fit, let's do it, or a, this is not a good fit.
Mhm.
And I didn't want to give complete control over somebody else who, you know, didn't know if how smart they were.
Mhm.
Were they really articulating things well? Our engineers at the company were okay. And so, but I also am just a curious person. I want to know how everything works. It's just, I don't know, it's dropped on my head as a child or something like that. Now I have to know how everything works. And there's probably, like, if you were to psychoanalyze it, there's probably a crippling anxiety of just not you know, not being a part of a conversation. It's sort
Sure.
of you get into if you're meeting with some people and all of a sudden they start deliberating in a different language.
Hmm.
You're like, I have no idea what's going on, and so I just I really want to be in the know,
Hmm.
and then you get you know back then it was Cisco ruled the world,
Hmm.
and man, those are some dry courses
Hmm.
that I started taking. If you ever need a nap on a Sunday, take CCNA courses. It's at like 3 o'clock in the afternoon. If you have a hard time sleeping, um, it could really replace sleeping drugs for many people. I could imagine. Not a doctor. Um, Despite my father's wishes, but so I can't prescribe things. But yeah, so that was the tech stuff. The entry level things were kind of boring, and I just kind of got through them because I was sort of like, oh, I need to check these boxes if
Hmm.
I'm going to be taken seriously.
Yeah.
And so, I went through those courses and got certifications. I took a bunch of the generic ones, a bunch of Microsoft things, Cisco systems stuff, Fortinet stuff, and then moving from generalist to being more hyper specialized,
Hmm.
and that's where I sit today. I'm hyper specialized in maybe a dozen things.
Hmm.
I'm not broadly specialized in 100 things.
Yeah.
And I think there's probably a good rationale for that for folks listening. I'm sure we'll dig into it at some point. But as I got more into the advanced stuff, especially into configuration,
Hmm.
then you're like, "Oh, I'm the artist. This is my canvas." And this is where you can create interesting differentiation as an engineer.
Mm.
Right. And, um, you know, I don't think anyone will ever say this, but I think it's being able to do customized cool things that other people can't do. It's definitely ego. I'll admit that, but it is cool.
Hmm.
And I think for a lot of people, if you can get to that point in your engineering journey where you can
Hmm.
do cool stuff that most people can't, it's kind of sick.
Yeah. So this hasn't really come up in any of our podcast episodes yet, but I have certainly seen and heard and talked to a lot of people out in the tech space who talk about imposter syndrome. And they kind of talk about, I'm surrounded by all these really smart people, all these people that have been doing, some kind of tech role for 10, 15, 20 years, and I feel like I'm kind of faking it, right? I will say this, I've certainly felt that way at various points along my career, but I've also gotten to points where I feel more like what you just talked about, where I really am able to sort of synthesize a whole bunch of things, pull together architectures that make a lot of sense, really solve the problem. I'm proud of it. It's fun. You're sort of building with Legos or whatever you want to call it for grown-ups, basically. Um, I'm curious if you ever did feel that imposter syndrome at any point along that journey, and whether or not you have, what sort of advice you have for folks that maybe do feel that way from time to time.
Yeah. So the Dunning Kruger effect, I think it's called, is absolutely real. And it is a rite of passage, I think. It's probably hard coded in our brains as humans. Basically, the Dunning Kruger effect. This is where you throw the image on the screen, right? Pull that one up, Jamie. It's a chart that's confidence versus actual knowledge, and it goes up, and they call this peak of Mount Stupidity. It's where you have unlimited confidence with just a little bit of knowledge, and then as you learn more, you go into I think it's the Valley of Despair.
I think that's right.
That is
Yep.
where your imposter syndrome hits,
Mhm.
and then you slowly climb as you accrue more knowledge
Mhm.
into that Kanye West level confidence. So yeah, no, it's 100% real, and I think it's a rite of passage for you know anything in life. Yeah, absolutely. What happens is you learn something, you have this excitement, and it feels like, oh, I can do everything in this domain,
Mhm.
whatever the subject matter is. And what it is you've gotten maybe a lot of hypothetical knowledge and a little bit of tactile knowledge, and you're just like, this is an unlock moment, and it's enthusiasm, excitement, and confidence.
Mhm.
And then you start doing, and then a lot of things don't happen as you draw them up.
Mm.
And then you're like, oh, interesting. Not as
Mhm.
good as I mentally thought.
Right.
And it's just the next part is putting in the reps
Mhm.
and actually gaining real world experience and going back up the confidence curve um is where you get real sustained confidence in your ability as an
Mhm.
engineer. And I would expect that in that valley of despair is where a lot of people call it quits and, oh, this
Mhm.
is too hard. um this is, I'll let the experts figure this out. I'm not as smart
Right.
as I thought. What you need to reframe that is just, I don't know, Google image search, um the Dunning-Kruger effect, and then, oh yeah, that checks out, right? I'm sure everybody can mentally rewind to a couple of those moments in the valley of despair. And that's where you can start to differentiate yourself as you go up. I think it's good to be humbled by things.
Mhm.
Just in life, it's good to be humbled by things. It's good to do hard things that you fail at. Those are your most valuable learning experiences. If you can get up from those failures and get back at something, that's when you're going to essentially build your career in something. Until that, you're sort of a job hopper, and you become a subject matter tourist across a lot of things,
Yeah.
and you never build that depth of expertise. And tech is great because you could, go through that Dunning Kruger effect in almost anything, and there's a viable market in TAM for expertise in that field, whether it's AI enabled or not, or
Mhm.
just human services. It's such a broad field, and there's so much subject matter subject matter expertise needed in all aspects of tech. It's also because probably a lot of people call it quits in that valley of despair, and so it's not a big herd; it's a pretty thin herd that's on the other side of that valley.
Mhm.
And if you just find your way to it, here's the other thing: is I think a lot of people are hesitant to specialize now because
Mm.
what's AI going to do? Is just going to
Mm.
eviscerate that market in
Mhm.
6 months, and maybe, right? I don't have a crystal ball, but I would say that tech is unique in that I would say 80% of the most valuable information in tech is gate kept, not indexed by the LLMs.
Mm.
And so if you are a subject matter expert at something, go ahead and have Claude or a ChatGPT run you through instructions on doing something complicated in your
Mhm.
line of business that's knowledge base is gate kept. You'll find it's absolute trash and will
Yeah.
completely screw whatever you're trying to do.
No, yeah, no, that's true. We actually talked about that a little bit earlier today in kind of getting ready for this episode, and I have certainly found that to be true. As a working chief information officer myself, there's absolutely details that Claude or ChatGPT simply doesn't know. Maybe it knows the 2023 version, right? But the specs have changed, the interface has changed, whatever it is, and, that stuff moves fast, and a lot of it is behind, as you said, kind of walled gardens that AI, at least right now, can't sort of see into necessarily, or they're relying on sort of secondary or tertiary sources that are lagging behind, right? Um,
Well, just a point
yeah,
on that is
yeah,
that, it, you know, look at the stock market. And every time Claude makes a big update, it's like stocks are cooking,
mhm,
getting cooked. And so what companies are doing on the defensive is they are creating walled gardens of their documentation very purposely, right?
mhm,
If you're going to use an AI agent to, administer their tool, you best believe they're building that agent, and they want an agent that's in their sandbox, not sharing information elsewhere. And so
Mhm.
everybody's deployed all these anti-scraping, as
Mhm.
little as a robot.txt file,
Mhm.
thou shalt not scrape this documentation. Um and so you're going to continue to see all these islands of knowledge completely separate from
Mhm.
the public corpus of scrapable data. It's already, I see it right now firsthand. It's already happening. And second is, if you allow these tools to scrape your documentation, you're making yourself way more, as a company, as a
Mhm.
software product, way more subjected to getting vibe coded out of existence, right? Because if you can see your whole knowledge base, one can probably reason how to put those microservices together to build a look-like. So the companies are doing this defensively, and I don't know, does that buy us all another 10 years of doing tech at a minimum?
Right.
So
Um, Switching gears maybe for a minute in terms of, some specific advice for folks, maybe, especially early to kind of mid-career folks who are looking for a job right now or thinking about, switching or something like that. Um, do you think there is a particular path if you were sort of in that situation currently, is there a particular path? For a while there were obviously like the code boot camps that were super hot. As you mentioned, for at least a couple decades, there've been all these sort of certs and other things that folks have been pursuing. Is any of that still relevant? Is it less relevant in the era of AI? Work from home, all those kinds of changes we've seen. What are kind of the key, you know, functional choices people can make to level up their careers?
kind of pricey, but probably worth it. I mean, if you could do um, an in-person, I don't know, AI is all the rage right now. In-person AI, whatever certification,
Mhm.
um, where you can meet like-minded peers that are either working for companies and getting upskilled by their company, or they're also on the job search,
Mhm.
right? Then you can kind of network, band together, help each other out. I think that's really important. Um, yeah, I mean, networking is a non-negotiable,
Mhm.
right? Because you can play exist in a pile of resumes, and you better have that metadata term of whatever VMware or this type of platform, or
Yeah.
that's what a lot of
Keyword
them are doing.
matching, basically.
Keyword
Yeah.
matching, yeah. So you either optimize for your keyword matching and then deploy resumes to a large numerator value of places, play that game, or you
Mhm.
can, do the networking angle is just a better angle,
Right.
right?
Right.
People, you know, as programmatic as we've become in a society, at the end of the day, somebody at a company says, "Hey, I have a candidate."
Mhm.
They're vouching for him for whatever reason. That counts 10x, like everything else. And so that it still does work.
Right.
We can move into this AI automation of all the things. At the end of the day, we have millions of years of biology
Mhm.
under the hood, and that's not changing anytime soon. So
Yeah.
people still trust people. There's the judgment,
Mhm.
you know, someone vouches for you.
Right.
Those are intangibles that folks need to take
Yeah.
advantage of.
Are there any particular, you know, I remember earlier in my career, there were these kind of user groups, right, here in the Los Angeles area, Linux user group, VMware user group. Um, a lot of them were actually in person. You'd meet up either at one of the companies would sort of host the whole group. Sometimes you'd meet up at other locations. Um, do those kinds of organizations still exist? Are there any that you recommend? Um, or do you think going to educational institutions, like you said, is kind of the way to?
The answer is everything works. Um, but I think that there's a way to do things well.
Okay.
So if you So if you're going to join a user group, here's what not to do: show up with your resume printed in a suit, and hey, I'm trying to get a job. Th- That is the worst way to present yourself in one of these user groups, because it it's sort of imagine hanging out with, if you're at an HOA meeting and you're surrounded by solar salesmen. It's like you're just never going to like unguard yourself. Um, it feels like there's an intruder in your little tribe you're trying to build. So I would say start off with the right intent and find a user group of something that you're genuinely excited about and want to contribute towards. Um, and don't be disingenuous about it. If you go in with the right intentions, that's where if you're just sort of chasing a job, like a job to these network groups, it's going to get sussed out early, and then it's just not going to work that way. So I would go there, and I understand that it's easy to say if you have job security, if you're sitting there unemployed and rent's due next month, whether you like it or not. It's hard to be like, oh, I'll contribute to this open source project for a bunch of free labor. Um, and so that has to be taken into account, that play the resume game, but the longer game is joining a group where you are genuinely excited about what they are doing and want to contribute to the mission.
Right.
If not, probably don't join the group,
Yeah.
because I think it's disingenuous, and I don't think the group really would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Somebody that's there actively soliciting people for a job role.
Right.
Uh, you can say, "Hey, I'm a free agent right now," and
Mhm.
have stuff that you're working on, and
Mhm.
and of course, be mindful of the mission of this group, and don't infiltrate it as a solicitor. Infiltrate it as a contributor.
Mhm.
And I think over the call it the medium term, you'll be rewarded for that. Um, and
I think maybe part of what I'm hearing in that advice is the best time to build those relationships is when you do have a job,
yeah,
right? And actually I'll say this, in my own career, that's a mistake I've made where I've been so heads down. And I think this is easy for a lot of people with kind of, an engineering mindset, a technical mindset, is you think you're rewarded kind of solely for delivering, code, delivering projects, checking off all that kind of stuff. And it's easy to sort of forget about building relationships and networking and all that kind of stuff. But it is so much easier to do that when you are working and you have interesting projects to talk about and, all of the above, right? You've got the corporate email address, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Um, so I think that's a great point for folks listening to this is, invest in yourself, invest in genuine relationships, as you said. Um, because it's way harder the day after you've been laid off or let go than it is when you're in the middle of some really cool projects.
yeah. I mean, let's take that. If great, and great engineers. I know great engineers. Great sales engineers. The folks that execute on what we just said, which is while they're working their day job, also hobbying on something technological, networking, working with user groups, and giving people the opportunity to see how passionate you are about what you're doing, contribute to exciting things, work together as a team. If those people ever get laid off, it's like a shark frenzy for who can grab them up soonest and get them in for an interview. And that's a position people want to be in,
Mhm.
is just sought after,
Right.
right? Like, God forbid something happens at their organization, everybody's like, awesome, big come up for me. I want to hire those people, right? People that I've got to see their work firsthand in some sort of, whether it's networking or whether it's a user group, whether it's having the opportunity to work with their company. And when you see engineers that are just love what they do, take pride in their work, when you see LinkedIn open to work, it's like, yes, let's go, let's get them on board. And so that's where again, it's really easy to say when you're in our places in our career when you're early on. And maybe we'll put a pin in that one, but say you're midway through in a mid stage in your career, if you can put yourself in that position such that you have lots of people that can vouch for you, lots of people that have witnessed things that you can do,
Mhm.
then that is the best job security you can have across the lifetime of your career.
Yeah,
Is again, it's people that can vouch.
right. No, those are really great points. I mean, uh, you know, again, earlier in my career, I put 0 effort into LinkedIn, right? And, to me, it was like, oh, I knew people that sort of just collected friends, connections on LinkedIn and people they hardly knew, frankly, right? And I thought, well, that's not very genuine and like what's the use in it, et cetera. But what I've realized is, you know, obviously there's nothing as good as the real sort of genuine engagements that you're talking about with people that truly know your work. But, in order to get there, other than the people you work with day to day, it does require, other kinds of engagement and outreach, right? Whether that is sort of a user group type of thing, shared educational experiences, working on some sort of, outside your day job project, et cetera. But, the way that you get those opportunities is sort of just by being available, being visible, right? And LinkedIn is obviously part of that, right? It's just one piece, but I think it is important. And yeah, I've realized there's a lot of folks that just, they're happy in their current role, and maybe they're great in their current role, but they're sort of invisible to the rest of the world, right? And I think that's again, it's easy to kind of fall into that. Frankly, in some ways, the more you like what you're doing, um, in some ways, the easier it is to fall into that. But I think it also it doesn't activate all of those other pathways that you're talking about.
LinkedIn's an interesting animal. To I think a lot of people, and myself included, when it's like self-promoting, self-aggrandizing
Mhm.
content, it's just like, yuck. This feels so gross just posting something. As far as personal branding goes, I'm not an expert of it. Don't take any of my advice. What's interesting though is I see some of the best engineers, the best tech people I know put 0 effort into LinkedIn, but they're putting a bunch of IRL
Mhm.
work in
Right.
and the networking. And so you don't have to have a LinkedIn to be successful if you're
Yeah.
doing real things in real life. On the contrary, I see a lot of awful engineers that have this whole thought leadership, personal brand strategy.
Mhm.
And I'm sort of like, oh, geez, you know, yuck. But oddly enough, it's like if they get out of the job, they have a new one lined up for them. So I guess it kind of works.
Okay.
Not for
Okay.
me,
Okay.
but I guess it kind of
So
works.
so maybe it doesn't pass your genuine smell test, right?
Correct.
And building those real relationships smell test, but it may actually still work is what I'm
It
hearing.
may actually still work.
All right, well, good to know for everyone
Yeah,
listening.
build a personal brand.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's not
yeah,
for me, but it seems to work.
right. Well, great. Well, Ben, I don't well, actually, let me just ask you 1 or 2 more quick questions. So, it's been a great conversation so far. When you are hiring engineers, here in 2026, what are the skills? And obviously, a lot of the work that your company does is around, cybersecurity and solutions engineering and things like that. Um, but what are kind of the absolute top 3 or 4 kind of skills, certifications, et cetera, that you look for when you're trying to hire somebody today?
So I do something a little unique, and it's kind of funny for me. So when I'm hiring an engineer, I pre LLMs, I used to sort of, I'd quiz people, and it might have been a little too much. Like if you just, get an A+ in the rote memorization of the content that I asked for,
Mhm.
then you could do pretty well. But it'd be a lot of problem solving stuff. Um, and now I do something particularly unique and borderline evil. What I do is so I have a it's called a bias towards Python engineer thinking.
Okay.
'Cause I think that the way Python engineers specifically approach problems, and just sort of, there's a lot of big data and analytics, which is very important skill set in what I do. And also, kind of predicate this with, we're working in cutting edge tech that is, very much in the analytical space, especially in security. And so I don't go after people with 10 years of system integration experience, because they're going to be have built a lot of reps. And, not saying I'm opposed to them. Of course, I'll talk to folks that have those skill sets and that knowledge and expertise. But I'm also open to more entry level engineers that are Python engineers that might not have even dabbled in cybersecurity,
Okay.
because I look for problem solving skills. Because a lot of this stuff you can learn, you can go through training and
Mhm.
do your rote memorization, and build some experience. And, we for our junior engineers, they'll, sort of watch a more senior engineer do it. Then the senior engineer will watch them do it, coach,
Mhm.
work out the kinks, and then, eventually they'll be doing it themselves. And so I worry less about learning, the factoids and the nuances of our business, because the reality is I'm in the cutting edge. I'm not going to find anyone with a year of experience on a platform that's existed 6 months. So I throw that out the window. I look for problem solving. And so again, I would say I bias on average to Python engineers, just because they've had to work that side of their brain a lot to and even a college degree.
Yeah.
So what I do that's kind of unique is I give them a challenge that should take them about 3 hours to do. But here's the interesting part: is I throw it through Claude and OpenAI to make sure that if you just try and vibe your way through it, it will waste your time indefinitely and you'll never get it. Like
Okay.
you could go for 100 hours and not get the answer. If you actually look at it and try and go have a thought process on it, it's designed beautifully to basically just put the LLMs through an infinite time waster loop. But the folks that actually go trying to approach it with their human brain will sort of like, okay. And it's generally not the hardest thing, but you should see the drop off of people that don't turn it in. We last engineer I hired, we gave that challenge out to our final 12, I want to say, or 10, just to see how they did. And we only got 3 submissions out of the 10. And these are all people with master's degrees, or, 4 or 6 year bachelor, master's in computer science. And so that was kind of unique. And I feel like and by the way, I don't even, like many people, I don't have a master's degree requirement. I don't have a 4 year bachelor degree requirement. I have, do you have some Python skills or something similar, or security skills? And I'm open to talking to a lot of different folks. I think in tech specifically, we're probably, as far as industries that are closest to a true meritocracy, I think we're there. Because I don't look at people's, where they went to college or this, that, and the other. I'm looking for intangibles, and, someone has technical expertise first and foremost. If you can also communicate with people, awesome. If you're a cultural fit, awesome, awesome, awesome. Right. That's kind of where I start the framework from. Um, and so, you know, now with the LLMs in place, there's no way I'm going to give them something that you just pop in a Claude and say, "Do this, no mistakes, enter. Here's your output," right? Because I could just do that myself. I'm looking to add another brain to the team,
Right.
And so hence the infinite time waste challenge. So
Very nice. Well, excellent. Well, Ben, thank you so much for joining. It's been a great conversation. Any closing thoughts or anything you'd like to just share with the listeners?
I feel like we've helped the people that are midway through their career excel. Maybe I think we should probably talk about people breaking in because
Sure.
we all started somewhere. Where did you start off? What was the first job in tech, and how'd you get it, and how'd you break
Yeah.
in?
Yeah. So my very first job in a tech role was working for a very small DARPA contractor. So Defense Advanced Research Project Agency. Um, they needed somebody to help run their computers, and I was local. I was basically high school at the time, and they're like, "Okay, this guy's inexpensive. Let's use him. We've heard good things about him." Um, that experience and some of just how quickly I saw tech evolving and how competitive it seemed, oddly enough, caused me to go to law school. So I actually remember telling a guidance counselor, I've decided I don't really want a career in technology. I'm going to go to law school instead. And went to law school, got my law degree, became a licensed attorney, worked as a licensed attorney, ended up in a career in technology.
So you saw the
Which,
rate of change in
yeah.
tech versus,
Yep.
hey, half this was written in 1776.
Quite literally. Yeah.
That's
Yep.
and so you want to go for safety.
Yeah. I mean, law, both fields were interesting to me. Um, one of the things I actually did like about law is it felt like a platform that, you know, interconnected with so many areas of business, of life, politics, et cetera. A lot of things I was just generally interested in. And it kind of felt like a better platform in many respects, to me, at least from my vantage point at the time, tech felt kind of more narrow. Um, and it did, truthfully, again, it was also that pace of change issue that kind of worried me. I was like, gosh, am I going to be in my mid 40s and having to just constantly learn new things? And apparently, yes, right. I mean, so, um, I guess I was thinking ahead pretty far there, um, but yeah, that was kind of it for me. And then I ended up just being pulled into legal projects that were tech adjacent. And from there, being told, hey, you really seem to have a lot of opinions about the operational aspects of the tech side of the business. Maybe that's really where you should be. So that was my journey. Yeah.
Sucks you back in. See, I'm
Yeah.
I'm I'm like the opposite. The idea of going into a slow changing role
Hmm.
would drive me nuts.
Hmm.
If I go to a if I if I go to a trade show, year one, then I go back the next year, and I haven't seen vast product improvements and changes and in things happening,
Yeah.
I'll just this was a waste of my time.
Right.
This industry is moving at the pace, a dinosaur's pace. What are we doing here?
Right.
So maybe this is better for my, I don't know, undiagnosed ADD or whatever it is, ADHD. But yeah, I think the rate of change is very exciting, and I think that with higher rates of change, you can hyper specialize in something that you're legitimately super interested in,
Hmm.
and it creates little mini TAMs or total addressable markets in that. So there's a lot of sandboxes to play in attack. Where
Right.
I'm getting at, and I think it goes back to, or if you're just starting off, you can kind of just start specializing, go through your valley of despair, build yourself up, and I mean, I think there's a lot of ways of breaking into tech. And I don't think it's just applying to 100 jobs that's going to get you there. I think
Hmm.
it's the networking, as we had mentioned, it's going out and doing things. Also, the the tools at people's disposal right now, it's not what we had when we were coming up, right? The technology was so gate kept. I mean, case in point, we just did a big experiment over the summer, and I actually did some research on how much it would have, how much it costed us. And I'm going to give incorrect figures, but they're roughly correct. I think we spent $1,400 on this experiment on Amazon Web Services. We probably could have done it cheaper in Vercel or Cloudflare developer platform, right? But we just did it on AWS.
Mhm.
We knew it had all the things that we needed, and we could just deploy it as infrastructure as code. And if we were to build this same thing from the technology that I had available to me when I started, it would have cost over $1 million, well over
Oh,
$1 million. We're talking deploying racks and
heavy iron,
yeah,
basically.
racks
Yeah.
and data centers all over the world, licensing a ton of products. And so you kids don't know how good you have it right now. There's really no excuses. When it comes to educational stuff, half these companies are like giving away, go play with our stuff. Here's
Right,
$500 in credits.
right.
Go, I don't know, have your Perplexity or ChatGPT or Claude just go find who's giving out developer and tester credits and for students and stuff like that.
Yeah.
I mean, that is there's so much out there for free or low cost that you can tinker with. And man, I wish I had that.
That's an interesting point. So the first CIO, full-blown CIO title job that I ever got, um, was at a research institute. So, not a standard for-profit company, but, a very interesting place that did a lot of, different types of technology research. And, they told me before they hired me, or right as they were hiring me, they said, "We really didn't think we'd end up hiring a lawyer as the CIO of a technology research institute. But when you showed us the diagram of your home lab, which was a fully populated rack at the time, they're like, we were pretty sure we had the right guy."
Yeah.
And, but again, it was literally a whole rack of equipment in my garage at that point. And to your point, you can replicate that same thing in AWS basically for free, right? So, or, a little mini computer that you put on your desktop or something. So, it is that in that regard, it's a very exciting time. Um, and I think you're really onto something. I think one of the themes, I've been kind of trying to sum up some of these conversations. And I think that one of the really important themes of this conversation that we've had is, genuine engagement with both people and your network, but also with, what I'll call the material that's available, right? The sort of the technologies, the projects that you're working on. Um, and I think that that's important, right? And I think that again, you sort of use the phrase hands-on reps, right? And, if you're not working for a giant company that has all of that available to you, how do you do it? Well, you can build it in a lab, right? So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
mean, here's an example. Like literally somebody could do this. I don't know when the release date is. Maybe it's past relevance, but like OpenClaw or just find out whatever the big thing on X that people are talking about in the space. I mean, if you were to go out and deploy OpenClaw today and then learn some pen testing or even just there's tons of GitHub packages on like
Mhm.
AI pen testing. You just have to drop a key in and just start, deploying OpenClaw, giving it some decent privileges, getting it connected to things, and then tinkering your way through trying to hack it and find vulnerabilities. You know, asking Open Claude even connected to a decent frontier LM, just how can you improve your security? Build a little what pull all that data, have your LLM just generate a blog on it, and put in
Mhm.
some screen recordings of doing that work. Put that out there, and people are going to want to have conversations with you. You can also if you build it on, let's say you build it on AWS or you build it on Google Cloud, find researchers that are Google Cloud also doing security research and be like, "Hey, man, really cool what you're doing. I want to show you something I built on Google Cloud." Or if you do it on AWS, "Hey, really cool what you do for a job. I have my dream job. I want
Mhm.
to show you something that I just built on AWS." Like those people are stoked to talk to people that are building on the platform that they work at and are doing cool things that are
Right,
relevant in
right.
in today's world. They're going to want to meet you.
Mhm.
And again, these are just easy ways of networking. Take this, copy and paste it to whatever you're interested in or whatever's topical right now.
Yep.
Add to the corpus of knowledge in the world and just do little things because most people aren't. They're just consuming the data.
Right,
So they're just reading it. Oh, that's interesting.
right.
Right. You go to a security conference, people, oh, OpenClaw is so insecure. It's like, hey, have you used it? Have you tested it? Go out, get your reps in. Hey, this is what I did. This is what I found. And you'll find that half the stuff that's out there is like, oh, actually, it's not as vulnerable to this as people are all talking about. It's actually this over here. Finding those things, you can make pretty big discoveries by just doing stuff because the people that are doing the most prolific discoveries on average are also busy with a lot of things.
Right.
Right. We're working. I don't have time. We were actually doing the Open Class Security project until OpenAI bought them. And then we're like, yeah, do we need to contribute to Sam Altman's open source anymore? But
Right,
I mean, if I'm just starting off, I mean, I'm hacking OpenClaw all day for like 3 days straight and then putting out a paper and then sending it to everybody that I can if I'm trying to find a job, right?
right,
You got
right.
to build a name for yourself.
Nice. Well, cool. Well, thank you, Ben. Excellent.
Yeah. Thanks for having
Yeah.
me.
Yeah, this was great. We'll have to do it again.
Yeah. Cheers.
Yeah.